Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are going to talk about NHD annotated bibliographies and process papers tonight. We'll talk about the rules, the requirements, and just fundamentals on these really important parts of an NHD project. My name is Wendy Rex Atzet. I'm the state coordinator for National History Day in Utah. I'm going to minimize the gallery here on my screen. So if our guests have any questions as we go, please holler and so that I can address them as we go through the material. And we'll get started. So we're going to start with the bibliography. We need to start with the reasons why we do this. Why do we require a bibliography? When should students start working on the bibliography and when should they finish it? How do we go about creating a bibliography and what are the rules for bibliographies from NHD? I'm sorry, I'm just playing around with that gallery button again. Okay, so we'll start there. So why do we cite our sources? The main reasons are, this is like, if we were mathematicians, we would have to show our work, right? And so bibliographies and citations are the way historians show their work. It shows the reader where you got your information, and it should give them a breadcrumb path that they can go actually find those sources on their own. This establishes your credibility and as a researcher. And this helps you avoid committing plagiarism, which is against the NHD rules. It's also a form of academic dishonesty, and this offers us an opportunity to talk to students about plagiarism, what it is, what it means, why it matters, and how citations and bibliographies solve that problem. So really quickly, I'm going to put the gallery up again. Why is it so hard to teach kids about plagiarism today? Anybody have some ideas?
I would say because they can get on the internet and, places like which I've been in PDs now where they actually are encouraging looking at Wikipedia as a kind of place to start getting sources. But, they can get onto Wikipedia or something like that, and they're seeing them copy information. So it gets a little bit harder to justify with them why that isn't the way to do proper research.
Great. The internet age has made this so much harder, right? Because it's normal to copy and paste things out of anything that you find on the internet. And it's not normalized to say, hey, I copied and pasted this, right? It's also, if you think about how social media works, that's what it's doing, right? It's taking posts or memes or any other thing on their feed, and the person who created it and the time and place it was created and the context in which that little thing was created is all invisible. And so the reason I have a picture of Stu here on the screen is because I feel like the internet and the social media webs have created information stew, and it looks delicious. It looks harmless, it looks healthy, but really you don't know what's in it. And so this is part of why plagiarism is hard to teach, because the sources of information have become kind of invisible, and all you see is this delicious meal. What we can do is teach students to think a little bit harder about the sources they're consuming and analyzing them and looking for things that are coming from credible places. So I just want to let you know about some resources and tools that we've developed for this, not just me. We did develop a Quizlet called Pull the Plug on Plagiarism. That QR code right here will take you right to that Quizlet. That focuses on plagiarism and asks some very specific questions about, okay, well, if I copy a sentence and I change 2 words, is that plagiarism? Right? So it really gets kids thinking on a detailed level about what is and it does and doesn't constitute plagiarism. I also strongly recommend the curriculum developed by Stanford History Education Group called Civic Online Reasoning, and the lateral reading components of that translate very directly to helping students think about the sources they are using in their history research as well. And there are, like, Sheg has worked with John Green to create short videos on some of this information, so it makes it pretty accessible for your students. And then we also created a tool here called Giving Proper Credit to Your Sources. I have that summarized on the next slide, but I just wanted to give you some prompts, some language to take, you know, this really kind of abstract language that we use about this is plagiarism and we have to cite our sources and get more to kid-friendly language. You know, do you want somebody else to do your thinking for you? No. Like, do you want to end up paying more for your car than it's worth? No, you have to look beyond the image, the picture, the stew, the delicious meal, and look at what's in it and what's behind it. So this is the tool that we developed called Giving Proper Credit to Your Sources. This is something that has been seems to me that it's confusing to students whether or not they need to cite, and then how they go about doing that in the context of a History Day project. So this tool is available in our toolkit Padlets. Students really only have 2 options for how to use information from any source, whether it's a primary source or a secondary source. They can quote from the source using the exact words in the source and enclosing those words in quotation marks, or they can paraphrase, which means they summarize the author in their own words. They don't use their word, they don't use the student's, they don't use the author's words, they summarize in the student's words. That means reading the text and then writing out your own summary on a separate piece of paper or in your document, not copy and pasting. So whichever thing they do, they have to cite it, right? They have to cite their quotes and they have to cite their paraphrases. So for History Day, they need to cite those things in 2 places, in the bibliography and in the project. And so moving down the flow chart here, citing the source in the annotated bibliography. There's an example there of how that bibliography citation should look if they're using MLA. They can use Chicago. It's up to you to decide that. And so I have just some basics, very, very brief, on what the annotated bibliography is. But then they also need to cite quotes and paraphrases in the project itself. So if they're doing an exhibit or a website, they need to provide a source credit beneath every quote and image in the project. And the source credits contain the title of the source, the year it was made, and the archive where the student found it. If they write more about that image or quote, then they're creating what we call a caption. That's different from a source credit. And captions are interpretive, right? They're the student explaining. Oh my goodness. Sorry, my cat is being a little bit of a pain. The credit is a student explaining something about the image or the quote. So those do count into their student composed words, but source credits don't count towards the student composed words. If students are competing in the paper category, they need to use footnotes, endnotes, or parenthetical references to cite the quotes and paraphrases that appear throughout the paper. Now, we allow MLA or Chicago style. Either one is fine. I will say that historians prefer to use footnotes or endnotes in paper writing because it just works better and allows judges to more easily track the sources. So a footnote, and I have a typo here, footnotes and endnotes look like this. They use a little note at the end of the quote, and then that correlates with the complete note at the end of the paper or the bottom of the page. And then in documentary and performance categories, even though those are script-based categories where people will be listening to the project, it's important to use keys in the script so that it's clear when students are quoting from a source. And so you can frame up the quote through words in your script. All right, so every single kind of project, they need to cite in the bibliography as well as in the project for quotes and paraphrases. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so the next real big question is, when should students start working on the bibliography? Anyone?
I would say when they start their research.
Yes, yes, they need to start right when they start their research. So this is a process that you're going to teach early before they start researching, so that they know why they have to go through all this work to capture that citation information, but also so that they are doing it consistently as they find their sources. And then they're going to keep track of that as they go, so that when they get to the end of the project and they're ready to generate a bibliography, all they have to do is generate the bibliography. They don't have to go back and try to find citation information. So this is going to require some time teaching at the outset and then support as they're going. There are lots of different ways to do research tracking. You can use a database. We used to use Noodle Tools. NHD had a good partnership with Noodle Tools. The state of Utah has stopped subscribing to Noodle Tools, and so now what's available to you for free through online library, is Scribble. It's a similar database kind of program. Once you learn how to use it and kids learn how to use it, it's really powerful. It allows them to take notes, and they could write their annotations right into Scribble. And basically that database will stay in place beyond even the life of this project. So it's different from like EasyBib, where you type in the citation information and then it just formats it. Scribble is a database that will also generate a formatted bibliography at the end. If you choose not to use an electronic system like Scribble or Noodle Tools, you can use a notebook. And in our project guide, like, I have a source tracking sheet that you can just make, 20 copies and kids fill it out by hand. If you choose to do the paper tracker, they will have to input all the citation information to generate that bibliography at the end. Another thing that you could use is you could develop a spreadsheet that kind of does the same thing. If your students are advanced enough to figure out how to do a merge out of a spreadsheet, maybe that would save them time. But if you want to have a tool that will generate a bibliography that's in the proper format, go with Scribble. Any questions about that? Okay, I'm going to move on. All right, so this is the rule from the NHD rulebook about the annotated bibliography. Every category, every project in every category needs to include an annotated bibliography. If students are working as part of a group, it's one bibliography for the project. They need to list all of the sources that they consulted in developing the entry. That does mean that if they used Wikipedia beyond just their project select or their topic selection, that needs to be listed in the bibliography. If they use a number of photos from one collection, they can combine all of those into a single citation just to save space and headache. They do need to separate the bibliography into two sections, one for primary sources and one for secondary sources. They shouldn't attach the actual primary sources or put screenshots or pictures of any of the materials in the bibliography. It is just a bibliography with annotations. Now, in categories that have a word limit, that's exhibits and websites, the bibliography and papers, sorry, exhibits, websites, and papers, the bibliography does not count against the word count. Okay, it is in addition to the word count of the project. Any questions about those points? Okay, so what do the annotations look like? Every citation needs to include a brief annotation, maximum 3 sentences. So it should not be a book, and it should not, the annotation shouldn't be a way that kids are trying to kind of circumvent the word count and the limitations on the word. It should explain how they use the source and how it helped them understand the topic. If there are some sources that might be considered primary or secondary, depending on how it's used. So the annotation is a place they can explain that. If they've bundled photos or things from the same collection in a single citation, one annotation applies to them all. I've got some duplicate information here. All right, and then here is a pretty particular rule that we added to the rule book with the latest revision, and it tries to clarify the source within a source issue. So if students are using secondary sources that have quotes or other primary source material inside the secondary source, how do they cite that? Well, there are a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, if you're pulling material out of a primary source material out of a secondary source, you're probably not getting all of the context, right? It's probably an excerpt. You probably don't know like what came before it or after it in the document. And so it's really best to try to track down the original primary source. If that's not possible, they can still use that material, but they need to be clear in their bibliography of what it is. So if the primary source material is included in its entirety and is unedited, like it's an image embedded of a whole letter from the top start to the end, then you can go ahead and cite it in the primary source section of the bibliography, but your citation has to include the secondary source where you found it, as well as the original, like the date it was created and the details on the source. But if an excerpt or only a small part of the primary source is included in the secondary source, then the students need to put that citation in the secondary source section of their bibliography. And then either way, they need to explain in the annotation how they use the material and why they classified it the way they did. And then if you look in the rule book, there's an example that visualizes this for them. Questions on that? It's really a technical thing. Okay. All right, specifications of the annotated bibliography. The title needs to be annotated bibliography, not references, not works cited. It's an annotated bib, so call it that. You can use MLA or Chicago style. It's totally fine to work with your English department and use MLA. You do not have to feel pressured to use Chicago just because we historians like it. Students do need to organize the sources in the bib into primary sources and secondary sources. Remember, primary sources are things that were created at that time in history. So make sure that the citation shows the creation date. Alphabetized by author within each of those sections. And then optionally, you can ask students to subdivide their sources within the primary and secondary sections into articles, books, interviews, images, photos, websites, other kinds of categories. I like doing that. I liked doing that when I was writing my own bibliographies, because it helps the student see if they have like an overabundance of images and a lack of textual sources. And so it makes it really visual. It also makes it a lot easier for the judges to evaluate the research, because they can see, like if you think of documentaries, they need so many images and video clips. So if those are all batched together, the judges can then more easily look at the text and documentary sources that complement the images. However, the the databases won't spit out a bibliography that's organized like this. So kids will have to do some engineering to do that sorting. It's not required. It's totally optional. I just wanted to explain it because you will see bibliographies that look like this. So formatting a bibliography. Always advise kids to use a hanging indent for the citation and then a full indent for the annotations, and then separate each entry with a line space. And this can be single spaced. I know that there's information out there saying that everything has to be double spaced. It's too hard to read these when they're double spaced. So single space it, just put a hard return between the entries so that judges can track through it easily. Questions about this? Okay, I'm moving on. So then the second piece of written work that the students need to turn in with the project is called a process paper. And this really is NHD building in that self-reflection component. And we're asking students to really think about the research process that they engaged in and tell us about it. So it's required in all 5 of the creative categories. Again, if students are working in a group, it's 1 process paper that goes with the project. The maximum length is 500 words. It is not meant to be an onerous, burdensome task. It does not count against the project word counts. We do not want to see quotes or images or captions or illustrations in here, although sometimes kids will use a footnote and that's okay. And the prompts are set out in the rule book, and students can just answer the prompts in first person. So this is derived from the process paper fillable tool that you can grab off of the toolkit. Judges are going to read that process paper to understand the work students did. It's the place for kids to share the most valuable aspects of their processes, challenges that they faced, discoveries that they made. It's about how they develop their knowledge and their ideas. It's not about, you know, my mom took me to the store to buy my supplies. Okay, we really want to hear about the intellectual work that went on in their heads. So the prompts are in bold. How did they choose the topic and why does that interest them? How does the topic relate to the annual theme? This is a place for them to show us once again how they are connecting to the theme ideas. How did you conduct your research? Where did they find their sources? Tell us about the books, the libraries, the collections that they used, and what sources turned out to be really crucial and helpful. This prompt about how they created their project, again, it's less about I built my exhibit board out of wood. It's more about how they went about devising maybe their theme or their visuals that relate to that topic. This is a good place for group projects to talk about how they split up the workload among the members of the group. We ask them to state their historical argument or thesis in the process paper. Remember that that is the argument they're making based on the evidence that they found and connecting to the theme ideas. And then talk about the ways their topic is significant in history. Why does this thing matter? What changed? What were the outcomes? So those are the prompts. They are set. They are standardized. We want kids to just read the prompt and answer it. Questions about the process paper? Okay. All right. And so the title page is going to be the title page for the packet of written materials. And I talk about it last because even though you'll see it first, you're going to prepare it last. So you need to be really careful and make sure that no school or teacher information appears on the title page. We don't want judges to know where the kids are from. We don't want images on the title page. We don't need fancy borders. I really prefer that the font is very, very legible and simple and not fancy script. Okay, this is really a functional document. So it's going to include the title of the project, the name or names of the students who did it. It's going to include the age division and category. If they are not sure if they're in junior or senior division or youth division, there are places where you can look that up in our materials, or you can send a quick email. So it's senior division individual exhibit or senior division group exhibit. And then the relevant word counts for their category. So for in the exhibit category, the word count maximum for student composed words is 500. So they provide us the word count and it has to be true. And then also the word count for their process paper, which is also a maximum of 500. Websites and papers have a different word limit than exhibits. And so they need to scale it to whatever category they're in and offer the judges an honest word count for student composed words. Any questions about the title page? Okay. Any fans of Phineas and Ferb here?
Yes, I've already taken a picture of it to show my son.
I'm a huge fan. Okay, so what do we do with all of this for the contest? It differs depending on the category that they're doing. Okay, at first I used to have a very simple sheet about this. I was like, you print it out, you put it in this order, and you staple it and bring it to the contest. But it's more complicated than that, actually. So for exhibits, documentaries, and performances, the order of the packet is title page, process paper, and then the annotated bibliography. They need to submit to the contest, they need to create a single PDF of the packet and upload that to their contest profile. And then they also print out 2 copies of the packet, staple those, and bring them to the contest to leave with the judges. Or in the case of exhibits, they just leave them with the exhibit on the table. If they are writing a paper, they will submit 1 PDF that includes the whole entire project. So the order of that is going to be the title page, then the process paper, then the body of their paper, including any appendices if they do appendices, and then the annotated bibliography at the end. They need to make 1 PDF that includes all of that. And then they upload that into their contest profile. And then the judges download the PDF and read it from there. If students are in the website category, these materials are integrated into the project in NHD Web Central. So all of the information that I said for the title page goes on their home page of their website. And then they will make a PDF of the process paper and another PDF of the annotated bibliography, and they will embed the 2 PDFs using the PDF viewer in NHD Web Central. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. All right. I'm going to unshare and open the mic for questions.
Wendy, will you have that slideshow available that we can refer to with our students?
Of course, I will. I'm going to make corrections to the parts that I noticed during my presentation, but then I will share it with you. And
That's
I can
great.
put it up in the teacher Padlet so that you can just grab it from there.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Are there questions that you run into with kids in the past that we haven't addressed here?
I have had a lot of questions just about what you talked about today, how to cite when they have primary and secondary in one source. So I thank you so much for addressing that. I specifically want to talk to them about that.
Yeah,
So.
that's tricky, and it doesn't seem intuitive until you really think it through. Anybody else? Any questions that I can answer? Any great experiences with Scribble that you want to share with the group?
My students are using it for the first time this year, and we're finding it already very helpful.
Good.
I'm learning along with them, so I'm not an expert, but I think it's a really great tool.
Does it seem liftable? Like, you know, I feel like you're always kind of weighing, is this going to just overwhelm us, or it's a lift that's pretty doable?
Well, I've had the privilege of having my librarian help in introducing it to the students. So she's taken on a lot of the role of teaching it to them.
Great.
And that's been wonderful. And I think the kids are already seeing the benefits of it.
Wonderful. What a great way to involve your library media specialist. Build out some support and build out a little bigger team. That's really smart.
Hey, Wendy, this is Shelley.
Hi,
Oh,
Shelley. Is it Shelley
I'm
R?
I'm a librarian.
Yes, you are.
I'll just add on to Scribble because obviously we're using it for the first time this year as well. The thing that I'm excited about is that, first of all, you're right, there's a lot of tools in Scribble, but I think you don't necessarily have to use everything, just kind of do what you can. And second of all, the part I'm excited about is that they can highlight the source and take notes right in Scribble. And I think that oftentimes the students save their source, but you don't know if they really read it.
Right.
So
they can capture their own notes in Scribble.
Yeah, so like it kind of saves the screenshot, and then you highlight, and then there's a spot with that highlight to put a note, and so it's all right there. And that was really hard before, telling if they really read the source and if they really took notes, or if they just took out their 10 quotes that they needed, you know. I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. Good to hear that feature. Any other, like, seriously, the mic is open. I'm just here to answer questions after a lot of technical details. Okay. Well, if there are none, I think we can wrap up here. And I will just say, you're always welcome to email me as questions arise. I know that they don't always pop up right when I'm asking you. So that's always an option. I'm going to stop the recording.